So before I get into the nitty-gritty, I just want to preface this by pointing out how much of a huge fan and how much I attribute a lot of the things that I have done with my life to John Green. I became a writer because he was a big inspiration to me. It's not the only reason I became a writer, but it was a large reason that I became a writer. I've also been a huge fan of him and his brother Hank and the Vlog Brothers, which if you haven't checked out their channel, you should check out Vlog Brothers. It's John Green and his brother Hank Green. They're both authors, and it's an amazing community. They're real OGs on YouTube, and they founded VidCon. I've been a nerd fighter there for over a decade at this point, like 13 years. I've read all of his books. I have a couple signed copies from him. I listen to their podcast weekly. So now that I've pointed out just how much of a fan I am, you know how much it pains me to say that I am not a fan at all of his 5th solo novel, Turtles All the Way Down. So, as I've pointed out multiple times, Looking for Alaska is my all-time favorite book, and the TV series adaptation on Hulu is, I think I put it at number 10 for my all-time favorite TV show. And one thing that I've always given John Green a lot of credit for is his characterization of teenagers and the realism that he puts into their lifestyle and interactions. Yeah, a lot of the time he has characters that talk way too elegantly, but he's a very brilliant man, so I kind of understand that seeping into characters. And Looking for Alaska, they all were at a boarding school for extremely gifted children, so that makes sense. But one thing I've always respected is that he walks the line of what's allowed in a young adult novel, and he sets a precedence, at least he used to, for what a young adult novel could be. In fact, in Looking for Alaska, there's a blowjob scene that has caused him a lot of issues with librarians and teachers and parents out there calling him a pornographer, but it's not. He puts it in there to contrast the difference between physical intimacy and emotional connection. And he talks about that a lot, and I've spoken about it in the past, defending it. And his novel, An Abundance of Catherines, is very quirky and a much different tone, but it also really shows what teenage relationships are like. They have sex, they drink, they smoke weed, they go out and have parties. It portrays teen life as not PG-13 because teenagers don't live PG-13 lives. Now, he also has a romance at the center of all of his novels. He's truly like a romance tragedy young adult novelist. And after further inspection, thinking about it a lot, every single one of those romances and the novels as a whole and how these teenagers interact and what they do goes down in quality in every single novel. It becomes less realistic, less what I would actually picture as young adult relationships and how they speak and what they do as real. And unfortunately, Turtles All the Way Down is the biggest offender of all. Now, The Fault in Our Stars was an amazing novel. It's one of my all-time favorites, but it does have the same problem this does with being unrealistic and tonally off when it comes to teenagers. And you have to admit that's true, even though it is an amazing book. Now, Turtles All the Way Down follows Asa. Asa has massive OCD and struggles with thought spirals. This is actually a book that I had a difficult time picking up because something I'm open about is I also struggle with some mental illness, and thought spirals is something that I relate with. I thought reading it would be less therapeutic to me and more of a challenge, but it was pretty therapeutic, so I will give it that. Anybody who has OCD or any other kind of mental illness that can relate to thought spirals of that kind, this will be a good book for you to realize that other people have problems like that and relate to it in a sense. The loose plot of this book is that a billionaire has gone missing and there is a massive reward for finding him. Asa just happens to have had a small fling with the billionaire's son years ago, so her and her best friend seek him out to talk about his father and any information that he might have so that they can track down this billionaire or find his dead body and get a reward from this. But that's not what this book is truly about. The plot is never what John Green's books is actually about. They're actually about the characters and the dialogue between them, and their relationships and the struggles in their life and of being a teenager. And this one is no different. Now, the dialogue between the characters is still amazing because John Green is still an amazing writer. But I think the biggest problem with this book is it feels safe. There's nothing in it that's new or original. It's not memorable. I read this months back, and I'm now doing a review on it, and I'm struggling to remember finer points or even broader elements of this book because it's just so safe. Looking for Alaska, yeah, I've read it dozens of times, but I can tell you everything about it. I've only ever read An Abundance of Catherines once. It's considered his least good book. It's the worst performing by far out of all of them. I can tell you so much about that. This one doesn't take any risks. I don't know why. I don't claim to be a mind reader. Never even met John. But it's just... the elements of this are safe. And it's predictable. You can tell exactly what's going to happen from the first chapter of the book. Now, so I'm not shitting on this completely. I will talk about Aza for a moment. The inner workings of Aza and hearing her inner dialogue is perfect. This book would not have worked if it was a third person or from the perspective of her best friend, who is a total opposite of Aza, by the way, but they make a very good relationship. I can picture them perfectly in my head in high school. But the inner workings of somebody who has OCD and the difficulties of her trying to talk herself out of these thought spirals, trying to justify all of these things that she does that she calls crazy, knowing that she shouldn't do them and they're a little off, is really a nice insight and look into somebody with those struggles. And John Green has talked about how he himself has severe OCD, and this book, writing it, much like people with OCD reading it, was very therapeutic for him and almost as difficult for him to write as The Fault in Our Stars. And The Fault in Our Stars, if you don't know, is very difficult for him to write because it was loosely based off of an actual tragedy that happened to a close young fan of his that actually died from cancer, and that was difficult for him to write. And he said this one was almost as difficult because of that. And I imagine because it was helpful for me, people that actually have OCD will connect with this character. And although this book is very safe and, to put it bluntly, not good in my opinion, I will say that it is a success if it just helps a few people with their OCD problems. So I will give it that. But that's the only thing I can give it. The only thing that really kept me coming back to this and listening to it, because I had it on an audiobook. I'll admit, if I was just reading it, I'm a slow reader, I could not have stuck with it. But I just had it on an audiobook. The person that read it was beautiful, beautiful voice, read it wonderfully. The same person that did The Fault in Our Stars. I'll put her name right here. That way you can look her up and you can see what I'm talking about. But what truly kept me coming back to this was just author loyalty and curiosity, because this is the first book that he's published in, I believe, 5 years, maybe even 6. And I just couldn't not read it. Like I said, this is a very difficult thing for me to talk about because I've been there for, 13 years. And I have no animosity towards John Green about the publication of this, but it does disappoint me that I waited 5 years for this after the amazing novel of The Fault in Our Stars. And he's talked about how there's been a lot of pressure on him in recent years to follow up on that and make something just as good. My understanding is that a lot more people like this book than dislike it. Yeah, it says right here, I looked it up, that on Google, 94% of people like this book. It has a 4 out of 5 on Goodreads and a 4.6 out of 5 on Barnes & Noble. So all around, people like this book. So I'm kind of an outlier, and that bums me out that I'm an outlier. But this is what I truly believe, controversial or not. But I would be genuinely extremely curious if anybody else had the kind of thoughts on this that I do. So please, if you do think like this, just comment below, let me know. Reach out to me. Maybe tell me why you think this lives up to John Green's other books and John Green's hype as an author, because he really is a great author. I know that I shit on this book and then I say again how amazing he is, but that's just because I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. I've been a part of this nerd fighter community for over a decade, and I don't want anybody to think that I hate this guy, because I don't. Like I said, I give him a lot of credit for helping me out of a lot of difficult times. When I was struggling and coming to terms with difficulties I was having, he would just happen to put out a video that spoke to me. But I really want to know why other people like this so much, because unfortunately I just can't wrap my head around it. But thanks for watching, guys. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, check out my other videos.